So let's go through the quiz and see if we can reveal some more information about it. So it was due 4 minutes ago. Some people occasionally ask me if they can submit things late, and in general the answer is no, unless there's a reason for it. So it's an interesting distribution here. The most modal response is 100%, and then second place is 33%, 1 out of 3. So let's see if we can figure out what's going on here. This is argument invalid, valid, or sound. So if a person plays the guitar, they are cool. Now let's say that's true. I don't think it's actually true. Let's just say it's true. Kearney is cool. Okay? So as it turns out, it doesn't matter whether or not you think that's true or not. For all of you guys that said valid, that means you're saying you don't think I'm cool. So as it turns out, it doesn't matter. If a person plays the guitar, they are cool. Kearney is cool, therefore Kearney plays the guitar. This is a classic affirming the consequent fallacy. I could be cool for some other reason besides playing the guitar. Okay. So for everybody on the channel that was saying, like, I don't know, I can't figure out if it's true or false that Kearney's cool. No, it doesn't matter. The reason why I put that there was actually deliberate for that reason. It looks like more of you guys said I'm not cool than cool. So yeah, definitely not giving any extra credit on that basis. Okay, so if a person plays guitar, they're cool. X implies Y. Y, therefore X, affirming the consequent fallacy. It's invalid. It's invalid reasoning. Okay, if you don't drink soda, you will die. I am alive, therefore I drink soda. This is a valid argument. Why is it valid? X implies Y. If you don't drink soda, you will die. X implies Y, not Y. Alive is the opposite of being dead, right? X implies Y, not Y, therefore not X. This is valid reasoning. This is modus tollens. Okay. Now, the question is it valid or is it sound? And the difference between valid and sound is, are the premises true? So whenever you get one of these types of problems, you first have to ask yourself, does the logic hold up? And in this case, this is a valid form of reasoning. And it looks very similar to this one. So you need to try to convert it into, X implies Y, Okay. That helps. If you rely on your English interpretation skills, you'll see that 47% of you guys got it wrong for that reason. And this one, 52% got it wrong. So even more got it wrong. So the form of the argumentation is valid. Now you have to ask yourself, step 2, are the premises true? So there's premise 1 and premise 2. Premise 2, I'm alive. Yep, hopefully I'm alive, you guys are alive. So that's premise is true. However, this is not true. It is not the case that if you don't drink soda, you will die. You can live a perfectly happy life without drinking any soda at all. Okay. I mean, arguably, you'd say that everyone will die. Okay. All mammals have hair. All mammals have hair, which is part of the definition of a mammal. Even dolphins have little vestigial bits of hair on them. But in order to hold off what if somebody shaves their head? So I just said, let's say it's true. Cats are mammals, therefore cats have hair. This is a standard deductive argument. So this is modus ponens, a standard argument by deduction. X implies Y, X, therefore Y. And it is, the logic holds up, both of the premises are true, therefore it is sound. So looks like most people got that one, but these two forms of arguments, looks like about half you guys had trouble with them. So study the Xi books will probably help as well on this. Okay, your first midterm will be next Friday. So next Friday we will have a midterm, and we'll review that later. But guess what? This will be on it. Invalid, valid, or sound will be on it. Okay. As will fallacies. I thought of hairless cats. Yeah. I said, assume this is true. There's usually some level of hair splitting, pun intended, that you can engage in these arguments. But like I said, just kind of go with the plain reading of them. How many questions on the midterm? It's usually between 20 and 30 on a midterm, with a 24-hour window to begin the test, and when you begin the test, there's 2 hours to take it or something like that. Like it's not designed to be a time race, you know. In my Japanese class, you get 5 minutes to take 10 questions, and so you know you have this feeling of like, you know, kind of being on the clock, you know. I don't believe in that. There's plenty of time. Like, it should take a quarter of 2 hours. Okay, so there's two different kinds of ways people make bad arguments. There's fallacies. You can kind of split fallacies into formal fallacies and informal fallacies. A formal fallacy is like what we've been doing with invalid, valid, and sound, where the logic doesn't hold, right? An informal fallacy is not a matter of the form of the argument, but more like, well, we'll see. And a cognitive bias is when one of the reasons why people make bad decisions, right? Like, I talked last time, like I didn't want Dr. Huxtable, you know, Bill Cosby, to be a rapist, right? And so I kind of resisted evidence to the contrary because I liked the Cosby Show in the 1980s. And so we're going to study these two things in detail. And so just like with the formal fallacies we've been studying, it's important to sort of train your mind to recognize them, because people make these fallacies all the time, and both in politics and in the media and on social media. And so it's really important to get a good grasp of the vocabulary that we're going to talk about today, not just for this class, but for life in general. Because for life in general, people will be coming at you with arguments, and even if they don't look like arguments. Like, an argument is like if you want to persuade somebody of something. But like, for example, a couple of weeks ago, the GameStop stock was exploding through the roof, and people were saying to the moon and diamond hands and things like that, and everyone was buying GameStop. And like, I'm on a Discord channel with some of my former students, and they all got Robinhood accounts, and they all started buying Dogecoin and GameStop, and lost all their money, right? And well, not all their money, but all the money they put into it mostly. And so they were engaging in what would be called an ad populum fallacy, right? Can we have another example, like number 2 on the quiz? I always confuse with affirming the consequent. Yeah. So it may help if you look up this term. May look like Greek to you, but I think it might be Latin. Yeah. Modus tollendo tollens, denying the consequent. Okay. So the form of modus tollens is valid. If P, then Q, not Q, therefore not P. So if X is true, if X implies Y, if X is true, Y must be true. And so if we know that Y is not true, we know that X cannot be true. Because if X was true, then Y would be true. And so if you know that Y is false, then you know that X has to be false as well. But if you have X implies Y, and you know that Y is true, you don't know if X is true or not. Because X could be true or X could be false. You know, in the human, the English brain especially, because we use the word if as if and only if a lot of times. We stress it. If you don't do your homework, you will get punishment. Right? Kid does their homework, punish them anyway. Why do you punish me? You said if I don't do my homework, I get punished. Yes, but I never said what would happen if you do your homework, right? It's the, like, and the parent in that case, while being mean, is actually correct from a logical perspective. If you don't do your homework, you will get punishment. Our English brain automatically creates another rule as well, which is that if you do your homework, you won't get punished. But the parent didn't say anything about that. They said if you don't do your homework, you get punished. And so you really have to study modus tollens and then affirming the consequent, because your English brain will trick you and deceive you, because it will generate rules that don't exist in the logic. If the dog detects an intruder, the dog will bark. The dog did not bark, therefore no intruder was detected. And so the form of this argument is valid. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. Yeah, and so just go through, look this up, modus tollens, and then also look up affirming the consequent. Because these are the two that students get confused all the time. And it really helps if you just break it down into X implies Y, okay, that's affirming the consequent. So if I tell you, if you don't do your homework, you will get punishment, and I say you got punished, then the person will assume you didn't do your homework. But I didn't say what happened if you do your homework. The parent just might be excessively cruel and punish them anyway, without lying. Okay. So run through those until you feel like you have a good grasp on them. Okay. So if you do not rob a bank, you will not get arrested. Yeah. Yeah. So just work through those. You need to train your brain to recognize them. Okay, so ad populum is the fallacy that my former students were engaged in. Everybody's buying GameStop. Everybody knows that it's going to go to the moon. It'll be at 1,000 in a week. Buy now or lose this great opportunity to triple your money. GameStop is at 300 something right now. It's going to go to 1,000. We all know this to be true. Ad populum. And in fact, you can check on the general channel here. Right. So who's all buying Dogecoin? I post bubbles are magic. Garrett says no bubble, rocket ship to the moon. Fear of missing out. Bubbles, 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 bubbles. Buy Dogecoin, rocket, 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 to the moon. Yeah. And so, yeah, that would be a classic ad populum. Okay. Everybody knows something to be true, therefore it's true. No. No. So that is not actually the case, right? So, And so there's usually exceptions to these fallacies as well. For some of them, at least about half. Half the fallacies have a reversal, which is like, suppose there's an event, and a lot of people witness something. Then, the more people that witness something that are credible, the more likely it is to have happened. Right? If you have to base your judgment of if something happened based on the number of witnesses, the more people that witness something and are seemingly reliable, then the more likely it is to have happened. Okay. I told you guys about this prank before, which is that this guy, you can actually watch the moment that his soul leaves his body. So he,
hey everyone.
They're in a prank war, and so they get this guy to think that he's won the right to throw a basket at the half court game or the halftime show. He has to throw a blindfolded basketball shot from half court, and everybody roars because they're all in on the prank on this. And so he's celebrating, he's cheering, he's running around, and then his friend comes out to present the check, and at that moment he knows that the gig is up, and you can see him collapse on the ground, devastated that he did not get $1 million. But he thought he had won $1 million because literally everybody is cheering, right? The guy from College Humor, I think, got everybody in on the event. And so this would be a case where this is the exception has an exception, right? 1 million people were lying, well, not 1 million, but a lot of people. The midterm will be 2 hours. It'll be 2 hours to do about 30 questions. So it's not designed to be a time trial. You don't have to move fast. I would study beforehand. It is open note, open internet, open whatever, open anything except your friends. Don't talk to your friends. It's not a cooperative event. The midterm is next Friday. Next Friday, after class, a 24-hour window will open up, and you can take the test within the 24 hours. Okay. All that for a prank. Yeah, on one hand, it's very funny. On the other hand, it's just damn, that was mean, dude. Like, the guy literally collapses to the ground, and you're just like, wow, his soul. You can see his soul just separating from his body at that moment, And so, my friends are my power. Not in that group, man. Not in that group. Okay. And so ad Verecundiam, we talked about this before as well, which is that just because it's related to ad populum, but the difference is ad populum is the appeal to a crowd, right? So like with GameStop, everybody knows that GameStop is going to hit 1,000. Whereas with ad Verecundiam, that's an appeal to an authority saying something. And in fact, with the GameStop thing, the authorities were saying, you guys should be careful. You could lose all of your money if you invest in a bubble. And the ad populum crowd, I think, won, and a lot of people invested, despite the authorities saying not to. So just because an authority says something doesn't mean that it's true. That said, a lot of the reversal of this is more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. The exception is, like, a lot of times in science and in academia in general, you don't have time to kind of go through everything yourself, right? In theory, in science, you could reproduce any result. In reality, you don't have CERN, right? You don't have a large hadron collider in your backyard, or at least probably you don't. Maybe you live in Grenoble, right? But most people don't have large hadron colliders in their backyard, and they don't have the background either to run the experiment and to analyze the results, or the computing power to do so, for that matter. So when CERN, which is a joint French-Swiss collaboration, when the scientists there say we've discovered the Higgs boson, which is kind of like what gives things mass, then people tend to believe it, And I would argue that you do have adequate reason to believe the Higgs boson exists, right? Like, despite you not having run the science yourself, and really having no ability to run the science yourself. It's the kind of thing where, like, at a certain level, you kind of have to trust people, But, basically in science, you shouldn't really take things on trust. You should, always, you should always have in the back of your mind when you're doing science, all of this could be wrong. We could be mistaken about all of it. But at the same point, at the same time, it's probably adequately justified that the Higgs boson exists. Okay. They're credible people. They've gone through peer review. They've published their data. Does this one relate to the toothpaste commercials? 9 out of 10 doctors recommend the toothpaste. Yeah. So that would be an appeal to authority, right? If anytime they say dentists recommend Crest toothbrushes. Here's the thing, right? Like, what was it, like 4 out of 5? I think it's like 4 out of 5 dentists recommend Crest, or something like that. Let's see, 4 out of 5 dentists recommend Trident gum, right? And what toothpaste do they actually recommend? And the answer is probably going to be all of them, because pretty much any fluoride-containing toothpaste they will all recommend. But it makes it sound like, well, if 4 out of 5 recommend Crest, they don't recommend the other ones. You know what I mean? Have you ever seen those toothpaste commercials that claim 4 out of 5 dentists recommend a specific brand of toothpaste? Truth is, it doesn't matter, right? Here's the thing: like 4 out of 5 dentists would recommend any of the major brands of toothpaste, but you do a survey, and in fact, I think for one of those surveys, they actually just asked 5 dentists, right? Like the Crest company, I don't remember which one it was. They actually just asked like five dentists, and 4 of them said, "Yeah, I'd recommend Crest," and the other one's like, "No, I don't recommend toothpaste to people," And so that is a classic appeal to authority, and the implication is only 1 out of the 5 dentists would recommend another brand of toothpaste, but as it turns out, pretty much any toothpaste is the same, and 4 to 5 dentists would recommend any of those toothpastes. Right? Make your own toothpaste. Yeah. So, and Trident gum, is another thing that dentists recommend. All right, so so the real fallacy. So there's argument from authority, and in reality, if the dentists tell you should use fluoride, toothpaste, you should probably use it. I would say there's adequate justification for that. As I've gotten older, I've come to trust authority less, but at the same time, I've come to trust dentists more. They actually know what they're talking about. So the real time, though, that is when the experts are speaking out of their authority area, right? So whenever you have an expert that's talking outside of their expert domain, like the Pope talking about COVID or something like that, like he's not a COVIDologist, you know what I mean? And so the time when there is a reversal of it, when something like this, but especially when there's an expert that's talking outside of their expertise area, then it's called an appeal to improper authority. So there's a argument from authority. Argument of authority is if an expert tells you something is true, it's not necessarily true. People are wrong all the time, even experts, And if you look at the field of nutrition, how many different conflicting advice people have given on diet. What's a healthy diet? The keto diet, the paleo diet, the Mediterranean diet, the South Beach diet, the Atkins diet. And they're all conflicting with each other, right? So yeah, and so just because an expert says something is true, it doesn't mean it's true. And if you look at nutrition, there's experts that just wholly disagree with each other, right? They all agree that you need, carbs and, well, no, maybe not even that, right? If you're Atkins, but in general, you need carbs and fat and protein to live, and as well as vitamins and minerals. Like, we know what it takes to keep people alive, but in terms of like a healthy diet, there's a lot of disagreement on it from the authorities who know what they're talking about, right? But there's even worse. There's an even worse fallacy than that, which is when they're speaking out of, when they're speaking out of their domain, right? So if you ask a nutritionist who they think is going to win the presidency next cycle, right? They're not experts on that, you know what I mean? Unless they happen to be double experts. But if you survey nutritionists to see who you think the next president's going to be, it's like they're speaking out of their subject area. So that's an appeal to improper authority. It's even worse than appeal to authority. So the keto diet, there was a survey that just came out that said that people that are on the keto diet have a greater risk of developing heart disease and something else. So, I have friends on the keto diet, and it's like, great, cool. All right, equivocation fallacy. So we talked about this earlier as well, which is when you use the same word in multiple senses. So I had one of those in our example on Wednesday, where I like studying hard things. Wood is hard, therefore I like studying wood. In the first sentence, hard means difficult. In the second sentence, I mean like physically hard. Therefore, that would be an equivocation. It looks like the form of the argument is valid, right? All men are mortal, women are not men, therefore women are immortal. All right, the form of the argument looks valid, but it doesn't work because the word men here refers to humankind, right? And here it refers to the male gender, right? And so that would be an equivocation. Right? Okay. We talked about fallacy of composition and division before. So fallacy of division and fallacy of composition are fallacies that just work in the different direction. And I apologize for going over this a second time, but you really need to review it. Just like with invalid, valid, and sound, it takes some time and takes some reviewing to get these terms under your belt. And I'll put up another quiz on this today, so you can further test your knowledge of fallacies and stuff. So a fallacy of composition is saying that is that which is true of the part, it must be true of the whole, and that's not the case, right? Like, just because a family is made of people doesn't mean a family is people. It's a concept, right? Not a physical thing. Some other good fallacies of composition. And fallacy of division goes the other way. That which is true of the group must be true of the parts. Also not the case. My car can go fast, therefore my car door can go fast. You know what I mean? Like, no. My car door just by itself cannot go fast. You know what I mean? And so sometimes things are greater than the sum of their parts, and vice versa. So just because my car door can open doesn't mean the car can, as a whole opens up, right? Just the door does. Yeah, it's true. Sources, dude, just trust me, bro. Yeah. Okay. Circular logic is when you you assume something to be true and then you conclude that is true, right? So if we assume that God is not real, we can then conclude from that all the evidence in the Bible is wrong. And if there's no evidence in the Bible, well, then there's no evidence for God. And if there's no evidence for God, then there's no reason to believe that God is real, right? So this would be a classic circular reasoning, where you start with your objective, right? You assume your conclusion to be true, and then you prove from that your conclusion is true. and you haven't actually engaged in an argument. You've just dressed up your assumptions, you've dressed up your prejudices as an argument, right? But really, I'm just saying, I'm going to assume God's not real, therefore God's not real. And cut out all the steps in the middle if you'd like. Okay. So, and then Christians oftentimes will make the opposite argument, which is God is real. Well, how do you know God is real? Well, the Bible says so. Well, how do you know the Bible's right? Well, because God made sure that it's right. Well, how do you know that that's right? Well, because I know God's real. And so it's circular reasoning in the opposite direction, right? So if you assume God to be real, then you can conclude from that the Bible is reliable. And how do you know the Bible's reliable? Well, because God's real. And well, if the Bible's reliable, then you know God's real, and it's circular reasoning. So, circular logic is very common in a lot of circumstances. You have to be very careful not to engage in. You have to move from premises to a different conclusion. If you just assume your conclusion, then you've done nothing. Appeal to consequences. I don't like what would be the case if you're right, therefore you're wrong. I don't like it would make me sad if you were right, therefore you're wrong. And so though there's an exception, and the exception would be like, well, if racism was correct, then we would be justified in, objectifying people of other races, slavery and genocide and things like that. And genocide and slavery are going to be bad outcomes, and therefore I will reject racism. Right? That's especially for people that believe in the pragmatic theory of truth, and that should be a capital P there, not a lowercase p. For people that believe in the pragmatic theory of truth, what that which is true is that which is beneficial. And so you could argue that, you can argue against racism on purely pragmatic grounds, like, racism leads to, treating other races as objects rather than people, stripping them of their natural rights, and it leads to things like slavery and genocide. Therefore, I reject racism. And that would be an example of, sort of a pragmatic argument. And a lot of basically the pragmatic theory of truth allows for appeal to consequences. Right? If you believe in the capital P, and I can just edit this here. Capital P, pragmatic theory of truth. If you believe in that, then the appeal to consequences fallacy is not a fallacy. It's not a fallacy. Right? You have to look at the outcomes of things. Gravity is real because if I jump off a cliff, I'll die. Right? So, I mean, the pragmatic theory of truth is literally the appeal to consequences fallacy, but they say it's not a fallacy; it's valid reasoning. So, so I said a lot of these debates between people can actually boil down to which theory of truth they pick. That's why I started with that. Which ethical theory do you subscribe to? Which theory of truth do you subscribe to? And if you tell me that, then a lot of times you don't even have to have a debate, because I can kind of see how it will play out. If you believe in the consensus theory of truth, you guys remember that? A statement is true because everyone agrees for it to be true. Remember that? So if you're a person that believes that the consensus theory of truth is correct, then ad populum is not a fallacy. Right? If everyone, or most people agreeing something is true, then it is true. If you believe in that theory of truth, then ad populum is not a fallacy. It's valid reasoning. So, if you believe in the pragmatic theory of truth, then appeal to consequences is not a fallacy. It's actually what makes something true. So, right? So, a lot of times we'll look at, like, sort of, we'll look at the consequences of beliefs, right? Like, some of the times where we do appeal to consequences, say, look, if, if you, some people believe that, I'll take the opposite stance now. Some people believe that words are harm, a form of harm, right? Like, that it's philosophically equivalent to actually punching somebody in the face, right? Certain kinds of harmful words. And I'm not talking about, like, so-called fighting words, like, like on Xbox, I did your mother last night, not like that, but like, there's a big debate in our society right now about terminology and the uses of words, and what words you can say on Twitter and what words you can't say on Twitter. And the people that are involved in, what's called cancel culture will say certain kinds of words are a form of harm. And so by saying these words on Twitter, you have harmed me, you've actively harmed me. And so, a counter argument to that would say, well, if we do subscribe to your theory that, just words, not like active incitements for violence and things like that, but just people stating their beliefs, if that's a form of harm, then that would lead to you suppressing other people's speech, right? And that's a big debate going on right now in our culture, right? Which is to what extent people on Twitter especially can regulate other people's speech on Twitter, right? They don't seem to have much, like on Facebook and things like that, you can control who your friends are, right? But on Twitter, anybody can respond to anybody, right? And so there's a really big debate right now on what's acceptable to be said, what's unacceptably said, and Gina Carano got canceled from The Mandalorian because she compared the current political climate to the persecution of the Jews in early Nazi Germany, when neighbors were sort of turning on each other and things like that. And ironically, people turned on her and canceled her for saying that that's what's happening. So, and then the people to flip it around, because I try to find good arguments for both sides. The other people said it's distasteful to compare yourself to a persecuted Jew, right? You're a movie star, you're not a persecuted Jew in Nazi Germany. It's distasteful to make such comparisons. You're making Disney look bad. Disney has the right as a private corporation to hire or fire whoever they want. And so, if you make Disney look bad, you should expect to get fired. So there's, there's the other side. So, this is, and if you're expecting me to like give you an easy answer to this, I don't have one, right? I'm just saying that, this is a big topic that we as a culture are debating right now, right? To what extent, what would normally, like, again, not illegal, like what she said was not illegal, right? And her getting fired was not illegal either. It was not against the First Amendment, as people sometimes say. The First Amendment stops government censorship. But the big debate right now is, like, to what extent people on Twitter can regulate other people's speech on Twitter. And there's, I don't have an answer for you. But the counter argument to the cancel culture people is like, to a certain extent, the cancel culture say, you said some things we didn't like and made Disney look bad. You have the right to get fired. The counter argument to that is that if you think that words are harm, then basically you're saying you're right, other people are wrong, other people don't have a right to express their opinions. And that's a very dangerous road to go down, right? You appeal to consequences. Look at what happens in societies when you suppress other people's opinions, right? So, yeah. So that's a hot topic right now online. And it's, to a certain extent, yeah, like anything that doesn't appeal to their ideology or opinions, it's a form of arrogance, I guess. Like, you know, like if you're very certain that you're right, then you know, you don't have much respect for people that disagree with you. You know what I mean? And so it's kind of tied to a certain amount of arrogance, right? And or I don't know if arrogance is the right word. Like I'm when I'm giving you these valid, invalid, and sound arguments, I'm very certain that I'm right about it because, you know, I've studied them for a while. The one thing that I might, you know, have some wiggle room on is if you don't drink soda, you will die. Because technically everybody dies at some point. You know, like that aside, you know, I'm pretty damn certain that I'm right about those things. But at the same time, I'm not gonna like cancel you guys and kick you off Discord if you disagree with me, right? I want you guys to disagree with me on, you know, on Discord. If you know, if you it's just like a matter of like, I don't understand why this is wrong, you know, and I'll explain it to you. But like, if you want to split hairs and say like, look, everyone dies, you know, we're all mortal, all men are mortal. Remember that, Professor Kearney? All men are mortal, right? We're all gonna die. You know, I'd be like, all right, fine, you know. I'm not going to cancel you over disagreeing with me. This is a critical thinking class. All of you should disagree with me at some point in this semester. If you agree with me on everything, then I don't even think that's possible because I will make arguments for both sides on a lot of topics. Okay. So, yeah, and so a lot of this cancel culture stuff just comes from a certain amount of intellectual arrogance and not considering the fact that they could be wrong. So, false generalization is when you take a couple samples. I drove 2 Fords back in the day. They're both trash. Therefore, all Fords are trash, right? Cherry picking is when you kind of do this deliberately. When you select, you select a couple examples to stand for the whole, right? So if you pick out the Pinto, you know, which was one of the worst made cars of all time, and say, look, this demonstrates the company that made the Pinto is trash. You know, it's like you picked one car out of the, you know, however many they've made over the years. You know what I mean? So that's a cherry picking fallacy when you're sort of deliberately selecting case studies to make your point. You know, and you're using the example to stand for the whole. And you deliberately select examples that you want to make the case that you want. And the converse is true also, where like people, when there's a conclusion you don't like, you'll say those are the exceptions to the rule, not the rule. And so the solution to false generalization and the solution to cherry picking is doing stats. You must, everybody, in my opinion, always, maybe not everyone, maybe not preschool kids, but pretty much anybody who goes through their life has to learn stats at some point, and to learn statistical testing, right? And to understand that when you make scientific claims, you're really making a statistical claim in most cases. You know, when we say that the COVID vaccine is effective, it doesn't mean it's 100% effective, right? What they do, you know, they have claims that it's 95% effective, you know, depending on it's Pfizer or Moderna or whatever. But even that, we don't know if it's right. You know, you have to do stats, and you have to run a study, and studies have error in it, you know. And they did a big enough study that I feel confident in it. But you actually have to do the work. So in order to counter a false generalization or a cherry-picking fallacy, you actually have to do the work. You know, is racism worse today than it was 4 years ago? Is racism worse today than it was 10 years ago? You know, people will point to cases like the Eric Gardner, right? Philando Castile, all these really horrible events that have taken place in the recent 4 years or so. But our deaths up, our deaths down. I almost never see those on the news, and so I have, like, you can try to find it, and it's like, are black men in particular more likely to be killed by the police? And the answer is yes. But are they more, right? But it's also no, depending on how you do the stats, and it's a really tricky issue. And I've tried, and there's very not good data sources on it, right? So all the data sources, are people picking, and they're trying to extrapolate, and there's really there's no nationwide database of like police shootings, right? And so people sort of put these things together, and you're like, and you have to put the time into it and run the stats, and it's a lot of mental effort to do it, and most people don't do the mental effort. I can tell you that every one of my black friends has been hassled by the police at some point or another, right? And and so at a certain point, at what point is it not cherry picking, right? At what point do you just say, all right, that's just a lot of people, there's something going on there. And so, one study I read said that police stops are a lot more common among African American men. And, because of my experience with my friends, I'm inclined to believe it. You know what I mean? I'm inclined to believe it. But, you have to be careful because, a lot of people's experiences don't match the statistics, right? If you look at the treatment of men versus women online, right? Men have a different experience online a lot of times than women, and so if somebody says something that doesn't match your experience, you tend to reject it. That's just how the human brain works. And so the only way out of that trap is by actually finding the numbers and finding good data sets and doing the statistics on it and doing analysis on it, and that takes a lot of mental effort, and most people don't want to do it, or you want to do it and you just can't find good data. So there is like a, because I have these debates with my friends online. Like to what extent, what do the numbers say, right? Yeah, I don't remember the university that's been running. I think it's the University of Chicago. Has been running studies on attitudes towards racism in America for like 60 or 80 years or something like that. And so those numbers actually look really good. Like the number of people opposed to multiracial marriages used to be like 70 or 80%. Now it's like 10%. And so you can see there's a decline on these things. But on things like police shootings, like there's no like good data source for it. There's just different police departments and thousands of police departments around the country, and so people try to extrapolate things from them. It's tough. It's a really tough question. Okay, moving goalposts. So moving goalposts is when you're having a dialogue with somebody and they make a good argument and you realize you're wrong, and so you change what you said originally, right? Without acknowledging that you're wrong. And this is a very common thing. It's an ego-preserving move. It preserves your ego, right? All Fords are terrible. Hey, the Mustang's a good car. Sure. Yeah, all Fords except Mustangs are terrible. So the claim was here, and then somebody says your claim's wrong, and you're like, and if you admit that you're wrong, then that's fine. Like, admitting you're wrong is a good character trait to have that most people don't like doing, right? If I am smart, then I won't be wrong. You're wrong, but that would imply that I'm not smart. I don't want to not be smart, therefore I can't be wrong. That's the internal non-reasoning that goes into a lot of these things where people just don't admit it. Right, and so if you admit that you're wrong, and then you allow me to re-clarify, then that's fine. Right? But it's when they see, I probably shouldn't even have sure here. I should just say all forces get less, and so they just claim you're wrong. Oh yeah, you're right. Except without the, yeah, you're right. part of it. Okay, no true Scotsman is a form of moving goalpost. And the classic argument for no true Scotsman is all Scotsmen eat kippers for breakfast. The other person says, hey, you know, Angus, he's a Scotsman, but he doesn't eat kippers for breakfast. And then the counter argument to this is, well, Angus isn't a true Scotsman. You know, and this is obviously a fallacy because whether you know, there's no intrinsic connection between Scotsmen and eating kippers. You know what I mean? Like, when I was in Scotland, we had kippers for breakfast. Kippers are a type of fish, and they're actually delicious. People kind of rag on Scottish food, but I actually had some really good meals in Scotland. And so he you know, again, it's an ego preserving move. Like, he doesn't want to admit he's wrong, and so he just says, well, so and so isn't a true whatever it is you're talking about. He's not a true Scotsman. Because a true Scotsman would eat kippers for breakfast. And so it's a false generalization, and it's a moving the goalposts, right? It's not actually the case that all Scotsmen eat kippers for breakfast, you know? And it doesn't make you a true Scotsman. You have to live in Scotland, probably, or be of Scottish descent to be a Scotsman. However, a lot of people will claim something is a no true Scotsman fallacy when it's not, simply because somebody uses the words, well, he's not a real Christian, or he's not a real doctor. As it turns out, somebody might not be a real doctor. You know, like, I don't know if Dr. Oz has a medical degree. He probably does, but you know, like Dr. Oz, like I've only seen him on TV a few times. So I kind of can't stand the guy. He's like, so he's always got like some nutty. In one case, it was actually nuts. Like, he had like a bowl of almonds, and he's like talking about this and that. And but yeah, there's a lot of people who give like legal advice that aren't lawyers. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you know, the police can't lie to you. You know, it's against the law for police to lie to you. And I would be like, hey, don't listen to that guy. He's not a true lawyer. Somebody might say, you're making a no true Scotsman argument. No. He's actually just not a lawyer. You know, because a lawyer, how do you know he's not a lawyer? Well, because a lawyer wouldn't say something as dumb as what you just said. Police can lie to you, and they do lie to you all the time. It is illegal for you to lie to the police. It is not illegal for the police to lie to you. And it is a common tactic to get people to confess by saying, all sorts of untrue things to you. They'll arrest two people, put them into different rooms, tell them that their friend confessed. But if you confess now, then you'll get a lighter sentence, which is also a lie. And then the person confesses, the other person hadn't confessed, and and so don't listen to a lot of legal advice online unless somebody's actually a lawyer, right? And so if you say so and so is not a lawyer, that's not a no true Scotsman. That's usually the case. You know, you know it's a lawyer speaking online because they'll say, "I am not your lawyer." They will say, "I am not offering legal advice. I am not your lawyer. I'm just going to speak generally about what I know about the law." That's how you know that they're a lawyer, because they do not want to get disbarred. So anytime you see somebody say, "I am not your lawyer and I am not giving you legal advice," that's usually a pretty good sign that they're a lawyer. Everybody else giving legal advice online is not a true lawyer, honestly. Okay. Found a quiz on pro profs. What if somebody confessed and it wasn't true, but they 100% thought it was true? False confessions are a thing, but that wasn't what I was talking about. What I was talking about is the fact that police will lie to you, you know, and so it's a common thing that people will say online is that police can't lie to you. Nope, you can't lie to the police. It's not a very just situation, right? Like if they can lie to you, you should be able to lie to them. You know, it seems fair, right? You know, I don't see why a criminal has any obligation to, you know, tell the truth to the police, right? But they do, and you will get obstruction of justice and things like that thrown at you if you lie to the police. So the best thing you do if you get arrested is to keep your damn mouth shut, right? Say, "I'm not going to speak to you until I have a lawyer." That's all you have to say. If you do that, that shuts down the police's ability to talk to you. "I won't say anything until I speak to a lawyer." It's easy, simple, couple words. Good life practice right there, right? Good life tips, right? So, red herring is when, does that I don't answer questions actually work then? Yeah, if you ever get in trouble with the police, the best thing to do is just say, I'm not going to answer any questions until I speak to a lawyer. And once you say that, they cannot, like anything they get out of you after that point, it's, well, actually, you shouldn't say anything after that point. Shut your damn mouth. Police are really good at getting people to talk. Well, before we get to your lawyer, is there anything you want to say? No, keep your damn mouth shut. And again, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm just speaking generally on the topic. Okay, I watched a YouTube video. That doesn't make me an expert. All right, so red herring and non sequitur is when you raise a point that is irrelevant to the discussion at hand, right? I love watching presidential debates because they are full of red herrings and non sequiturs. It is so much fun. Don't make it into a drinking game though, because you will die of alcohol poisoning. Okay. So moderator, if implemented, your plan will cost $10 trillion. How do you plan to pay for it? I believe this was asked of like Bernie Sanders, who wanted to do Medicare for all or something like that, and or free healthcare. I think it was like just free universal healthcare. So if implemented, your plan will cost $10 trillion. How are you going to pay for it? And the politician responds, I think it was Bernie. He said, well, that's just a Republican talking point. Well, that's not. That's a non sequitur, or in this case, it's a red herring. A red herring is a deliberate non sequitur. A red herring is when you're deliberately trying to distract from the argument you're having, right? So there was a claim made. The claim was your plan will cost $10 trillion. And a good counter argument to that would be like, look, the entire medical industry is only, $5 or $6 trillion a year. And it's probably going to be cheaper than however much we spend right now due to the inefficiencies in the current system. Like that would be a good counter argument. Instead, it's like, well, that's just a Republican talking point. That's a red herring. It has nothing to do with the claim being made. And a non sequitur is when it's sort of accidental. A red herring is when it's deliberate. Okay. And then on the Republican side of things, because again, I attack all sides equally. Abstinence-only sex education has been shown to be less effective at stopping teen pregnancies than comprehensive sex education. So, since you claim that you are opposed to teens getting pregnant, why do you support abstinence-only education? Great question that gets asked of Republican candidates now and again. And to which I watched a response that was something like this. I'm not quoting it exactly, but something along these lines. I think one of the fundamental values in America is freedom and the holy bond between parent and their child. Get the government out of our bodies and out of our families. Applause. Right? Didn't answer the question. Sounds like they answered the question. It's not right for the government to be involved in that conversation between parent and child. But that wasn't the question being asked. And politicians are very good at this. They're very good at making it sound like they answered the question without answering it. Right? It's highly amusing to me to just watch politicians not answer questions while sounding like they answered the question, and then everyone applauds. Right? I'm gonna say my CSI professor told me, yeah, I can post you a YouTube video called "Don't Talk to the Police." It's quite good. Okay, so there's actually not a board game, it's a card game called The Contender, where you make political speeches and you play non sequiturs and things like that. It's quite amusing. So, a red herring is when you're intentionally trying to distract away from the topic. Okay. And a non sequitur is when you're having an argument with somebody and what you say doesn't actually connect to the argument. Okay. So we're a little bit over time, so let's just finish with a couple examples here. People like looking at giant sequoias. Houses should have nice things to look at inside of them. Therefore, you should put giant sequoias inside of your house. It's a question of intention. So this is an equivocation fallacy, right? So like looking at something doesn't mean, you need to put in your house. You know what I mean? I like looking at the Grand Canyon. That doesn't mean I need to put it in my house, right? So, do you think this is deliberate or unintentional? It's a question of intention. That's the only difference between a red herring and non-sequitur. So I don't have an answer for you. Okay. People say that it was wrong for me to rig the primaries. But what does it mean to say something is wrong? Are there any objective moral systems that everybody agrees to? No. There's many different moral systems, and everybody agrees on different ones. Therefore, you cannot say that what I did was wrong, because nobody can even agree what wrong means. Red herring. Right. That's quite obviously an intentional attempt to distract away from whatever crime it is they're being accused of, like Blagojevich, auctioning off Obama's Senate seat. He was the governor of Illinois, and he was caught, basically trying to get money to get somebody nominated for Obama's Senate seat. Pardoned by Trump in one of the weirdest political moves of all time, because Blagojevich is a Democrat from a Democrat state who was auctioning off a Democratic Senate seat, and Trump pardoned him, of all things, or not pardoned him, commuted his sentence. But this would be the type of argument that somebody like that would make, where they know they're wrong, and so they just start blathering and distracting and things like that. So this would be a classic red herring right here. Okay. So sometimes you do need to have a sidebar and have a conversation about what definitions mean and things like that. But you can... what it means for something to be wrong is something that philosophers have been debating for thousands of years. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to resolve that question here. And so if you can get people to agree to discuss what it means to be wrong first, you will never get back. You will never come back from that maze. You're trying to lead somebody into a labyrinth and get them stuck there so that they never get back to the place where you actually have to admit that you did something wrong. Okay? So you're trying to trap them in the labyrinth, of philosophical discussions. So basically, if somebody tries doing that to you in an argument, just say, we're not going to be distracted. We can have that conversation another time. I don't want to be distracted. I don't want to. That's a non sequitur. Stay on target. And a lot of people in online conversations will get annoyed at you when you don't follow them down the rabbit hole into an infinite maze of philosophical discussions. Okay? Just stay on target. Stay on target, like it's Star Wars. Okay. So that's it for today. We'll follow this up next time with a few more. But the midterm will have valid, invalid, and sound on it, and it will have fallacies on it, and it will have logic on it. Those are the three things we've talked about so far. That's what's going to be on the midterm. If you guys have been doing the quiz questions, they're basically that. And so the quizzes are worth only a couple points. The midterm's worth a lot more points. So get practice in, and you'll do fine. I don't do trick questions and things like that. Everything is pretty straightforward with my questions. Like, I'm not there to trick you. During lecture, yeah, sure. On a midterm, on a quiz, like I try to ask pretty straightforward questions. Don't overthink it. Okay. When is it again? It will be next Friday after class. There will be a 24-hour window that will open up. Once you start it, the timer is going. Don't close out of your Canvas window. Don't open it up to just take a look at it and then close it, because the timer's running once you open it up. A friend of mine, Nico, who's probably going to be at my front door any second now, he's picking up some deliveries for the college. He tried starting the test 10 minutes before the deadline, thinking that he would get the whole 2 hours of time to get the absolute latest moment whatsoever to take the test, and because he signed up for my game development class. I teach video game development as well, and the window came slamming shut on him. He got like a 5 on the final or something like that. Do we have to know the specific terms for logic? Modus ponens, modus tollens, tollens. Nope. like the quiz questions will give you an idea of what my midterms are like. Okay. So basically, what I've been giving you are midterm questions. Okay. Not the actual ones. You don't, you know, I don't duplicate questions, but that's the general idea. Okay. So that will give you an idea of what the midterm will be like. All right. So we're quite over time now. Sorry about that. So I will see you guys on Monday, and I'll throw up a quiz on what we talked about today, so you guys can kind of test your knowledge a little bit. All right. See you guys. Bye. No study guide? Sure. I can post like old midterms and things like that, so you can take a look at them. Sure. Okay. See you guys.